All right, at 4:03, we're going to commence the beginning of our end-to-end review phase for the two domains that we have been working together on in classic Gravity collaborative fashion over the course of the last few months. So grateful for all of you attending the call today, and we look forward to spending an hour to an hour and a half with you reviewing these concepts. Next slide, please. As always, welcome. You are all muted upon entry. There's plenty of opportunities to unmute because we do try to have as much of a seminar, like collective conversation as possible. The calls are recorded, always on the Confluence. Send any chat to everybody so that we can make sure that everyone's included in the conversation. And I do try to slow down the conversation and focus on things in the chat so we can make sure we center all voices. Next slide, please. Here's the common antitrust practices slide. We have a responsibility to comply fully with federal and state antitrust laws. We state this slide every single time. I will not go into repeating it, but just note this is part of the charter for doing this work together, that this is part of something that we all agree to abide by. Next slide, please. Incredibly grateful for our 2023 sponsors and partners. If anyone ever has interest in their organization becoming a sponsor, please let us know. We do have pretty exciting ways to engage in the work now. We are reinvigorating our operating committee with very clear roles about how to help guide and steer the work that we have ahead of us, still always with that representative stakeholder organization to ensure we balance all the different invested member voices. So if anyone wants to participate as a member, supporting member, you always can find the links on the Confluence, and we are very, very grateful because, as you all know, we would not be able to do this work without you. Next slide, please. There's a lot of Sarah talking here, but it's never all Sarah, so we look forward to having more voices. Brief announcements, just touching base on the schedule that we're winding down on. And then we'll enter into our thoughtful end-to-end review with some very clear action items and homework for everybody on the call. This is when engaging in the Confluence and the master list becomes very, very important. Again, briefly touching base on those all domain updates and revisions because they will be part of the vote on the 17th, and then closing with homework. Next slide, please. And next slide. Our announcements are fairly straightforward. We are on target for the publication, of our STU 2.1, which is a new iteration of the implementation guide. We do welcome everybody to come to the Wednesdays 1 to 2 meetings. We just had our CMS Connect-a-thon where I hope everyone could participate, seeing MITRE testing out a benefits eligibility use case, leveraging other resources within FHIR to connect individuals to Medicare Advantage supplemental benefits. Pretty exciting to see that in action. Our next Connect-a-thon is in September at the HL7 working group meeting in Phoenix, and you always can find information on any announcement on the Confluence. Just a note to USCDI, it's not on here because it was late breaking, but if anyone wants to become incredibly nerdy and review, USCDI v4 was just released into the ecosystem by ONC, and we'll be talking more about that at the next meeting. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is the roadmap, well known to all of you. We're up here in digital access and literacy. We are looking forward to small projects we might be able to round out the end of our year, and looking forward to prioritizing a whole bunch of work that needs to get done for 2024 for terminology. Again, the STU 2.1 is about to be published. We just test that eligibility of social care services use case at the Connect-a-thon. There's a lot of work happening in pilots. Always join us on the pilots call the last Thursdays of the month. We have our 4 public health pilots. Lots of work happening with dissemination and education updates. Again, creating repeatable documents for everybody to use in implementation. And very, very excited to kick off our social care co-design work starting on August 10th, which is the centering of social care voices to ensure that we're listening well to those voices and then applying that in 2024. So very active roadmap across our work streams, and we're very grateful for everyone for helping with that work. Next slide, please. Any questions on announcements or roadmap? Okay, so heading into the next set of work. Next slide, please. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague Hamali, who's going to be talking about some of the value set updates we've been doing. Hamali.
Thanks, Sarah. So until now, we had value sets related to assessments where the value sets were built for 17 clinical domain and one grouper value set, which encompasses all those value sets for assessment. And when we say assessment, it was including only panel level codes for all the assessment per domain for 17 domain. But as we started looking more into it, and based on what we are learning from the implementer, it was very clear that having all the panel level codes is at high level was not enough, because most of the screeners in social care domains are comprehensive, which means multiple social risk domains are included in one instrument. And it was very important that we focus on domain level questions, which are key for the implementers and for mapping diagnosis and interventions. So there are some of the comprehensive screeners which are very well known and has been used for across multiple clinical domains, such as AHC, where we have referenced AHC in food insecurity, housing insecurity, transportation insecurity, and it also has interpersonal violence related questions, but not intimate partner violence or elder abuse. So although we have referenced AHC in other domains, because it does not completely cover intimate partner violence and elder abuse, we did not include interpersonal violence questions from AHC. So it was very important for Gravity to list all the questions which are pertaining to a specific clinical domain, not just at instrument or panel level, but at a question level. So based on the need, we have created now a question level and answer level value sets in VSAC. So these tables provides an overview of the assessment value sets, which are in second column, which includes 17 domain specific assessment value sets, which are panel level codes, and social determinants of health screening assessment, which is already in existence in VSAC. And on top of that, we built another 18 value sets for question level code, LOINC codes, and answer level codes. We also have grouper value set, which includes panel codes and questions code together. So in total, now there are 72 assessment value sets in VSAC, and those are published this week. So if you are using these value sets and want to access those, you can, when we will share these slides, there is a link here that you can click, and one that will take you to VSAC. In VSAC, if you refine by the Gravity project, and in names column, if you search on asterisk assessment, you will be able to see all these 72 value sets. So those are all ready and available for implementers and ecosystem to use. So that's a quick update on terminology build. With that, Sarah, I'm passing it to you.
It was a quick update on a massive amount of work. I just want to note and thank the terminology team for leading this work. It really was based on the understanding that when listening to implementers, because by simply representing domains by panels, it was hard to know for implementers to know which of the questions were relevant for the domain. So this work is really a huge step forward in assisting implementers in pointing to the right questions and the correct answers within the limitations of what VSAC allows. So hoping this is useful to all of you there in the ecosystem, and incredibly grateful to the team at the Gravity Terminology team for doing all of this work, which was massive over the course of the last months. And thanks, Mike, for your comment. Any other questions on this work? Again, it can be explored through VSAC. And again, to access VSAC, there's some information on how to do that on the Confluence. You just need to sign up, but you can use any like normal public access, use your Google account or whatever to access, and you can get access very shortly. All of our final works are housed within the VSAC, within NLM VSAC Value Set Authority Center. So.
And Sarah, one thing I want to point out is that because in VSAC, we cannot represent the logic of which question belong to a given panel or which answers goes with which question. So that logic cannot be represented in VSAC, but that logic is listed on our spreadsheet, which are listed per domain on the conference webpage. So you can always download the value set from VSAC, and if you are looking to implement the logic, that will be listed on the conference spreadsheets.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah, and
And
I'll
Sarah-
add to that. Go ahead,
Oh,
Corey.
Monique, you're probably going to say the same thing I was.
Yeah, I'm going to add that one key thing that the work Hamali and her team have done here has actually taken these codes, which were represented in the prior release of our implementation guide, in a supplemental guide. And you could go there and find the right value set for a given domain, but that was cumbersome for implementers. It's far easier if these value sets are in VSAC for them. So, so looking for that supplemental guide, that anyone who was using it previously, that won't be there anymore. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add the last thing as it relates, for that specific logic about what are the allowable answers for a given panel and question combination. That logic does also live in LOINC.
Yep.
So just as a side note, you can find, if you know the panel and you know the question, you can determine the allowable answers in a codified way in LOINC.
Thanks, Puri. Thanks, Monique. Sarah, passing it back to you.
Thank you, Hamali, and thank you, team. Just making sure everyone gets their flowers before we move on. Again, this is a huge area of work, and we're very grateful because it represents kind of an evolving collaboration between terminology and tech to make sure that we're supporting implementation across just terminology or the IG. So very exciting. The nerds are in the room, we're all very excited. Next slide, please. Okay, and next slide. It is super exciting for me to level set here again. We do this at the end of every domain on where we are moving to now. So over the last months of time, we've been in what we call the identify phase, where it's our primary job to think of things that are absent, to put them into terms, to define them. Again, this meeting and the next meeting, it is our job and our charter to simply review what we've done and make sure it is good. So we have moved from identify to the review phase, and it's exciting to talk to you about that work as we go forward. Next slide, please. This is the calendar. Hi, Ring. Nice to see you here. So this is the calendar. You can see we're at the end of our, we're closing down our work here with digital access and digital literacy, beginning end-to-end review. Your homework will be clear as we go on. And again, we have this meeting and the next meeting focused on end-to-end review. And then we vote in August on the 17th. Incredibly exciting. So close. And then after we vote, of course, terminology, it becomes the workshop, and we transfer all the things that you all have collectively created into submissions to the coding organizations themselves. So we submit the LOINC instruments into LOINC. We submit a vast amount of information across diagnoses, goals, and interventions into SNOMED, and then we create our ICD-10 submissions as well. So the public work transitions into behind the scenes terminology build on August 20th. About. Next slide, please. Again, we just wanted to level set. So we put this slide up every single time. Why end-to-end review? What is the point of it? What are we doing now? It's really a time to step back and consider the whole set, that master list, and ask questions. Are we missing anything? Are there incorrect concepts that need to be changed, including definitions? Are there concepts that are unnecessary and can be removed? And we really ask, we enter a very formal process here for these two end-to-end reviews meetings. It's different than the kind of collective, synergy, all kinds of documentation in the chat. In order to document end-to-end review, it's almost like submitting a JIRA ticket. We need you to submit via an email a written request with a rationale and evidence for suggested alternate approaches, because there's been a lot of work up to this point. Just respecting that work, we want you to write us at gravityproject8till7.org, tell us what needs to be done with a rationale evidence, and then how you would suggest fixing it. That is all possible by reviewing the master lists that we post on the Confluence, right? So this moment and the comments that happen in this meeting are really for understanding, understanding shifts in definitions, themes we might have corrected, but really the work happens in reviewing the masters, downloading them, and then commenting in a formal fashion, because all of those comments must be logged and reconciled. Again, that's that last bullet. All elements must be assessed by our subject matter experts, and we have formal responses to each comment and end-to-end review. For those individuals who've been part of it before, we have everything codified so that we respond with an acknowledged or accepted or whatever. So just note that this phase that we're entering into right now is commenting on the set as a whole that can again be accessed on the Confluence. And there's a formal process for this. So we make sure that we honor all the work that's been done and honor the labor to change. And then everything gets assessed by our SMEs on Tuesday. Any questions regarding end-to-end review? This is also, of course, going to be within an email very shortly on Tuesday, just to help everybody along. Any questions? Or maybe you all are so old hat at this, you're like, we got it. Okay. You can always email us with questions. We're here to help you with this process. And again, we want to make sure we get comments early so we can make edits early in time for our next meeting. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, we said that we posted this every single time. You can access the masters on the Confluence by the end of day, the day after the public call. Last time was a little bit of a delay because there were so many comments to reconcile the masters. It was a late Friday afternoon work session. For mostly thankful to Hamali and Sarah Bahal on that, even though we all lended a hand. But you can access them again, download them, and then this is what you would review. You can also disseminate them. So if you want to show them to people in your ecosystem and in your partners in your work and make sure that they feel that those concepts are, again, is something wrong? Is something missing? Does something need to be removed, right? All of those questions, you can bring in your friends and have a little work meeting or, a coffee session in your local coffee shop to review the spreadsheets and make sure that they're fit for purpose. We really want to make sure they're right. And this month, a review is how to make that happen. Again, all comments have to be submitted via email to gravityproject@hl7.org. Any questions there? Okay, next slide. All right. What we are going to do for the next chunk of time, because this is end-to-end review, is really just discuss thematic changes, right? There's some things that are new, digital literacy programs, but most of the things that you're going to be seeing are changes in definitions or slight changing in wording, with the understanding always to integrate the comments that you've had prior. We get a lot of lovely comments on the call or via email, and to make sure that we're creating things that are semantically clear, like do I look at the term and understand what it's supposed to mean? And we're very grateful for all of our subject matter experts for helping us in this. It was a big definition review on Tuesday and will likely continue to be. Again, we want to make sure we get these definitions right. And again, they're always aligned with evidence. We have frameworks of reference that we have to bind our definitions to because our terminology organizations require that of us. Next slide, please. All right, thank you to the SMEs. They've worked so hard. We're so grateful to them. We could not do this work without them, and they're just brilliant. So then just huge thanks to the 5 SMEs who've helped us over the course of the last months, and will continue to as we head into review and the vote. Next slide, please. All right, this is again just a grounder slide. We pulled digital literacy from health literacy and access to material hardship. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. We really have tried to just clarify, and again, we're not going to be too deep into particulars here, but we had our former term was inadequate digital access due to inadequate digital service and community. And it's been revised to inadequate digital access due to lack of adequate internet service and community. There's a reason for that. It's all based on repeating syntax. So there's basically ways we're talking about things in other places, and we're just keeping that theme as we go forward. There's also a significant update in definitions that you'll see, really based on your feedback regarding comments on what reliable means and sufficiency of service. So you can see whenever we're talking about service now, adequate internet service, we've added the qualifiers, reliable and of sufficient speed, right? So this is to verify that we do have some sense of what we mean when we say adequate digital like internet service to be adequate, that it has to meet those core components. We reviewed whether or not to add broadband specifically, but at the advice of our SMEs, we really leaned into the sufficient speed theme. And you'll see that repeated through all of our definitions that reference internet service as a thing. Any questions? And again, there's this theme of making sure our syntax is in common and making sure our definitions included that reliable and of sufficient speed are repeated across every definition that we have. And if Monique wants to speak to this, she's a really wonderful leader in the definition space. But
yeah, the only thing I'll add, Sarah, because you covered the adequate internet, so we tried to sort of, give adequacy a nod to it has to be adequate, not just some internet. And then also we added the to participate in day-to-day and work life as sort of it allows a little subjectivity for the individual, what's enough for the individual.
thank you so much. I'm sorry, I forgot that one. Any questions on this theme? Because I want to center on this theme now, and then we're going to see it repeating across future slides. Correct, Mark. Yes. Correct. Mark is asking, so sufficient speed may evolve over time and vary with different technologies and apps. Because certainly what sufficient speed meant 10 years ago is not sufficient now, right? So in an increasingly digitized world, we want to make sure that we allowed flexibility at this, for the evolution of requirements. And that's part of the day-to-day and work life as well. Mark, do you want to explain what you're saying?
It seems like seems like sufficient will be different in different situations, even at present time. So just keeping that static. So you may be an apples and oranges comparison from one app to another, from one technology platform to another. I'm guessing that our subject matter experts have thought all that through, that variability at a larger national ecosystem level is a hard thing to accomplish, and a hard thing to get people talking the same way with each other, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think we can only represent the understanding that is in the ecosystem. So it was very hard to define it anymore if there's not a common definition in the ecosystem at this time, So as the understanding in the national ecosystem evolves, we can easily nail down and further specify the definition when if there's a agreed upon base speed state. Unfortunately, that's not where we found ourselves in reviewing the literature and reviewing the data from the FCC, and broadband access we thought about that, but then we examined that, and then we still arrived back here. But if anyone feels like this isn't sufficient, please submit an email comment with the suggestions for how it could be made better, because this is what NTIN Review is for, is looking at this and saying, is this really enough? Is this good enough? And then helping us get it better.
Sarah, may I throw out one example to be watchful for, where it may actually produce adverse consequences?
Mm-hmm.
And that is sort of defining what's a reasonable amount of time to reply to a patient's request for information, or to provide information.
Yeah.
And the standard for provider to provider is one thing, but there are people in the policy world who are saying it shouldn't be that quick for patients. So you may get a definition of sufficiency that says, within seconds from provider to provider, but patients waiting for the same information over the same technology platform, it may be 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours.
Hmm.
Just an example of the kind of thing to be thinking about and how this definition might play out, and to try sort of from that spirit of our social justice principles, our data principles, trying to think ahead of time about what we can do to avoid as many adverse consequences as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, would you mind submitting that as an email just so we can formally log it? I hate to be so just because of the end-to-end review process. That's a brilliant thought. We want to make sure that we include it and formally respond.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on the syntax changes and the definition changes that you see here? All right, so you're going to see this played out over the next slide. So if you look at the next slide, well, first of all, this next slide is our new terms, because we realized that we had specific impact codes for digital literacy, but not for digital access. And we felt that wasn't a flaw. We felt like if we leaned into creating codes that defined how digital literacy was impacting healthcare, employment, and education, we needed the same codes for digital access. So we've done that. And then we did create a specific inadequate digital access due to limited financial resources term as well. The definitions mirror all of the definitions we've had in the prior. What is the definition of reasonable expectation for an individual and organization? Can you speak to that, Jonathan? Hi, Jonathan. And help me understand what you mean.
Hello.
Hi, Jonathan.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So I was just kind of following up on the last conversation. Sorry, I'm a slow typist, right? But I feel like, to that gentleman's point, right, a reasonable expectation between clinicians is different than a reasonable expectation between a clinician and a patient. And then if we're talking about digital access, right, if it takes somebody a little while to find a hotspot or to get on Wi-Fi to be able to respond to that, I think those things are going to be different. But I would caution us from being overly prescriptive, because I think it's going to be different. And I think that as time goes on, it's going to change, because we know that technology capabilities change over time, right? So that's just kind of where I was saying, if we're using a benchmark for what a reasonable expectation is between peer-to-peer, between clinicians, and then between a clinician and a patient, I think that that's going to look a little bit different, but I think that we shouldn't be overly prescriptive on what that looks like.
I hear you. Thank you so
Agree.
much.
And that was definitely played in. And also what, to Sarah's earlier point, what's a good speed now may not be a good speed in 4 years. So we don't want to define the speed per se as some specific speed. And also that's where that piece to participate in day-to-day and work life comes in. So to your point, Jonathan, if your life involves a certain, it's about your life and what you need for your life. And rather than specifying that fully in the definition, there's some leeway there to accommodate the things you just talked about.
So I said all that to say this. I think that this is a great starting point, right? It's a great foundation to be able to level set. And then as technology changes and we start to get more information, then obviously if we need to drill a little bit deeper, we can. But I think, to the gentleman's point earlier, having that in the back of our mind as we go forward, I think it's better to be proactive than reactive as well.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. All right, so, and again, thank you so much. So the primary work, again, is going to be to reviewing these in a master list. So I'm just going to say, we added these terms. If you all feel like they need to be taken away, send us an email and say, please remove those terms, right? Because we are in end-to-end review now. So we're trying to focus our comments on that. And again, if anything regarding the theme seems weird, or if it seems like we've went off the rails, please comment here in the meeting today. This was just added to mirror the build we had in digital literacy. Next slide, please. I want to let them, oh, hi, Janice. Yes.
Hi, how are you? I was just
Okay.
curious if we can go back to the last slide regarding digital access and health services. Does that also include like being able to go into your state's health plan to find, access? Does that include that as well?
Oh, you mean, so we changed it to healthcare if you back
Right.
up. Yes, there's actually, that was, if you back up one slide, I'm so sorry. And Marianne's asking questions, is coding of patient access correct? I mean, patient, like from the point of the patient, Marianne, if that's what you're asking. So Marianne was asking that question, Janice, but you can see what we did actually is broaden
Okay, good.
care.
Uh-huh.
Because one of our amazing SMEs, Boomi, was stating very clearly that she thought that healthcare access was too limiting, given the possibilities for healthcare being across, being quite expansive and evolving. So I do feel like you could make a case that that would be part of that if you can't access it. I mean, again, these are terms, this is the SNOMED CT term. So it's still that one IC10 code. So allowing that SNOMED CT term to represent that need for the patient seems entirely appropriate.
I would just add in there though, because like people have to sometimes every year renew their
And yes,
health plan, whatever. So add health plan somewhere in the definition.
we will
Yeah,
take
and
that.
the definition does specifically say includes but not limited to allow for what you're saying, Janet, but we can try to tinker a little, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Jenna, sorry to be annoying, but if you wouldn't mind sending an email just for the sake of process, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
You're so kind. Thank you. I do want to make sure this is like we so respect the comments that people have. We want to make sure that we honor them and respond to them accordingly. Okay. I think I addressed Marianne's question. Hi, Marianne. It's nice to see you again. Okay, next slide. And then these are, Monique, do you want to speak to the revised definitions here since you were so crucial in these?
Sure.
Putting you on the spot. I'm so sorry.
So for the inadequate digital access, we just made it clear that there are two components to that. So if you have inadequate access, you lack adequate internet, and again, adequate behind that, we should probably add that reliable and of appropriate speed to participate in day-to-day and work life, or you can have either or both of these lacks, but a digital device with which to access the internet. And that device by definition has to be a device that's, appropriate. If you have a functional ability or inability, it will be appropriate for that. So that was sort of the revised definition to try to be sort of generic and yet cover what we think inadequate digital access is. And then, that is the reverse of our definition of adequate digital access, which I think, Sarah, is a few slides down. But to be honest, we started with a definition for what adequate digital access was, and that was having adequate internet to participate in day-to-day and work life and a digital device. So to have adequate, you have to have both. To have inadequate, you can lack one or the other or both. So that's where we started with inadequate digital access, and then we basically just built on that definition. Sarah, I don't think the other three are really much different.
No, and I think the important thing to note is, again, from a point of structure, having defined inadequate digital access, we were allowed to just leverage that term in multiple definitions without getting too confusing, right? So we defined inadequate digital access thoroughly, and you can see inadequate digital access repeating across all the applicable terms, right? So that's just the theme you'll see. Next slide. And then again, this is the same theme continued. And so those are the inadequate digital access diagnostic terms. Again, the themes were leaning in to add that reliable and of sufficient speed to describe the service. And then thoroughly defining inadequate digital access and then repeating it across all of the different other definitions. And then you have the set that we have. You can again see some changes in syntax just to make sure that we're repeating things the same way across all of our terms. But other than that, there's not much of a change, really. It's just making sure that the two themes again are getting that inadequate digital access set so we could just repeat it.
Yeah, there's just a minor.
Hi, Tom.
Minor typo on the SNOMED CT first line, inadequate digital access due to lack of enrollment.
Oh yeah, and luckily that's the one that that's not the revised one, so good thing. Bill. It's a good thing when your typo is in the old one and not the new one. Thank you. And noted, we'll fix that just for the sake of, again, next time we bring these slides back though, we'll only have the revised term. We won't represent the old one, just so, and all of the definitions will settle into the one recommended one. We have a charter and a purpose. We always try to show you the thing that was there and then what it changed to, so you all can follow along. Okay, next slide. And then this is again that same thing. So like Monique was talking about, so that if we defined inadequate access, the inverse of it is adequate access, and it follows the same syntax and structure. And nothing else is changing there. Enrolled internet service and has internet enabled digital device, those things have remained the same. Next slide. All right, are we good with definitions? Again, download the master lists, review the definitions and the terms, submit your comments to gravityproject8till7.org. And we'd love to hear them. Next slide. There is no change at all in the digital access programs and professions. They still, if you review the master list and you feel like something was missing, send us a comment, or something's odd, send us a change. Again, we just want to make sure that we are thorough, but there was no changes on these in the last meeting, but we want to just present them again so we can click through. It's nice when things have settled enough, there's no change. And next slide. And next slide. All right, instruments. There was also no change in digital access instruments. And so just from a point of thoroughness, we were going to, we can go to the next slide. What we've done is put the slides, instead of having all of the different questions and answers, these are the 4 core instruments that we have for digital access at this time. Again, it's a very specific short little set of terms that will be fairly easy to build into LOINC, and we're looking forward to working with our colleagues to do so. Of note, the VA Acorn instrument will not go into LOINC until it's finished review and revisions, and we're working with the VA on that as well. Next slide.
Sir, I just want to point out that we have also submitted American Community Survey to LOINC, and that will be
Correct, yeah.
released next year. Yeah.
Again, huge thanks to the team. I mean, taking on the onus of submitting the American Community Survey to LOINC for every single social need relevant term is not a small lift, and incredibly grateful to Regent Streif, to our team here at Gravity, and to the US Census Bureau for working together on that, because the American Community Survey questions are all over everywhere. So they were a really critical gap to be filled. Next slide, please. Again, this is just the approach that we took. I'm just reminding you all. So we decided basically, in the absence of a gold standard scaling approach, to build basic digital literacy terms, and then those impact terms applying to specific use cases. And you saw us build the new ones for digital access recently. And then again, just as with digital access, we're just going to leave room to refine levels as standards evolve in time. If there is an emerging agreed upon gold standard for scaling digital literacy in the US ecosystem, we will apply it. But until that happens, this is where we are. Next slide. And again, I say that very easily. It took a lot of work with our subject matter experts and our team and the collective to come to that point. So I just want to give you all a little round of applause. That was a lot of labor that we did together with great care and intention to get to this point, and I don't want to brush over it. So again, not any changes here. So we have the 2 ICD-10 terms we'll be suggesting, and a set of SNOMED CT terms. Again, the definitions are based off the USAID and the Essential Digital Skills Framework, which aligns in general with DigComp and the other frameworks out there in the ecosystem. All those frameworks and references are available on our Confluence, as are all the instruments I mentioned. Again, the Confluence is maintained by Hamali and Sarah Bahal in this beautiful fashion. So if you ever want to see the literature grounding our work and look at the instruments in their original form, you can always find it there. I'm just so grateful for all that work. Next slide, please. There are some revised definitions here. which really were a collective labor through this collective and the subject matter experts. What you're going to see in the revised SNOMED CT is really us repeating the same syntax and structure that we agreed upon with digital access, centering the fact this is a digital literacy problem, and then affecting healthcare, affecting employment, affecting education, because that allows us really to imagine grouping these concerns under digital literacy as opposed to under healthcare, employment, and education in a taxonomy. And then we have a revised definition, which is a little bit more robust, trying to represent the breadth of possible, and that includes but not limited to for those 3 different use cases. Anything else to say, Monique, on this work, since you and even Corey, thank you, Corey, and AMA for leading into this. Anything else to say on this slide?
No, I think this mirrors the 3, like you said, the 3 digital access codes. And we led with the problem because these will be subtypes of inadequate digital literacy that way, as opposed to leading with healthcare affected by.
Thank you. All right, next slide. Again, this has not changed. We have adequate basic digital literacy skills and digital resilience. We talked about these at the last meeting. Next slide, please do the goal statements again. Next slide. We do have some updates because we were so busy in definitions that we had to do an intensive review of digital literacy programs and professions at our last meeting. Thank you, Janice. Next slide. You're going to see there's a lot of common programs and professions from health literacy, but there's specific programs and professions related to digital literacy. If you compare the health literacy and digital literacy list, we did do due diligence to make sure that we were aligned. So you have digital literacy program, that general parent, adult learning center, patient advocate program, peer support, reading services, telephone and relay services. And again, the threshold here is can you imagine a use case or a patient story where it's helpful? This is not meant to be like a limited set, but a representative set of the things that we do. And so if I could figure out a story or a patient or a client or a situation where it applied, then we usually include it. Specific things that you'll see are, the health literacy program for teaching excellence in adult literacy, or the North Star Digital Literacy Program, the Digital Navigator, which is a super critical role within digital literacy, and then peer support specialists. Where can we find this slide? So this slide is always available on the Confluence after the call, but if you want to find the program and a definition, you can find the program and its definition on the master list, on the Confluence. It was like, I don't remember what slide it was early, and you can just download it, the master list spreadsheet from the Confluence, Jonathan, and see all these terms and their definitions. You always also can just write us afterwards and we'll help you. We gotcha. Jonathan, was that a good answer? Are you good? Okay, great. Okay, and then these are some of those all, we say domains all because community resource networks, area agencies on aging, benefit enrollment, those are all domains. And then charitable organizations, CDCs and CDFIs. These are just things that we repeat across most of our programs because they're applicable depending on the setting or the community. Next slide, please. And then the roles: care manager, care navigator, case manager, community health worker, lawyer, and social worker. And just a reminder, these programs or professions get dropped into the syntax that we collectively created over the course of our first years. So it's education about, refer to, evaluation of eligibility for, right? So all of these programs and professions, once we agree on that they're important and that we agree on their definition, we then wrap them in the syntax so they can become SNOMED CT terms. All of that syntax and all of those terms you can find on the master list. So if you want to see it in live, the master list that you'll download will show all of these things in action. You can filter the master list to look by type or look by program. And so you can kind of engage in a dynamic way to make sure that you understand it. Anything else, Hamali, you want to say about engaging in the programs and professions in review on the spreadsheets? Since,
I think you covered it all, Sarah. This was
okay,
definitely a new addition to our slides. So review from the community would be extremely helpful.
yes, we really want to make sure that you review. So those master lists are the place to go. And again, the first tab of a master list has our definitions. So when you look at the first tab, it'll have the definitions for all of the diagnoses and the goal statements and the programs and professions, right? So if you want to, and there's usually references where we got them, and it's either 2-in-1 alignment or government resources or publicly available resources. So all of that information, all bound in evidence, is always on the master list as well, and also repeat on the Confluence when it's appropriate to do so. Next slide, please. We are such nerds collectively. Next slide. This is the list again of the digital literacy instruments. There's a fair number of them, a little bit more than the digital access. And again, a note that the VA Acorn tool is in the process of being refined slightly. And when it's complete, we are going to work with our colleagues at the VA to make sure it's well represented in LOINC. It is a really lovely, comprehensive instrument that includes a lot of our favorite domain level tools, such as the Hunger Vital Sign. So when that's ready, it'll go into production with LOINC as well. Next slide. And next slide. No changes here. These are those patterns we applied from health literacy, which were really again, just going to remind ourselves that with the literacy elements, there's both personal literacy and organizational literacy. Organizational literacy is how well the organization or structures or systems are meeting the person. So from a person-centered perspective, when we did health literacy, we did not want to build terms that neglected organizational responsibilities to meet patients where they are. So we created the terms that you see on the left column, the health literacy terms, and all we did was apply those terms to digital access and digital literacy. These have not changed since last time. But again, this is from understanding the responsibilities of systems to meet patients and clients. We again repeated the same ethical objective that we had with health literacy. And again, thanks for the collective for raising this as something that we needed to do. We just remembered that we did it in health literacy and then reapplied it. Yes, Janice. I love the abbreviation. So important. And then next slide, please. All right, any questions? We just completed a very high level review of the things that changed in digital access and digital literacy since we last saw you, hoping to at least orient you to the themes of things that have changed. So when you do your homework, which is to go to the Confluence and download those masters and look at them as a whole, again, thinking about things that are missing, thinking about things that need to be corrected, thinking about things that need to be removed. And then you can send us comments to gravityproject@hL7.org with a rationale, evidence, and suggested fix. And then we can make sure that we include those fixes, review them with the subject matter experts, and then address them possibly in the next meeting. Any questions on any of that? Look at us. Hi, Ray.
Hey, Sarah. It's not so much a question, but more of a thanks for all of this work. And I wanted to let everyone know that we are going to be using this. We have specifically a digital literacy project that's currently ongoing, where health centers are trying to figure out how to measure and assess digital literacy for our health centers. And this work is kind of seminal work for that. We saw that I looked at my terminology search engine and I didn't see anything. So all of these new codes, I think we're really looking forward to using them and getting them in and, starting to collect data in these standards. So I just wanted to say thank you. And we're going to be using it. So I'm going to be reviewing it as well. Thanks, Aaron.
Oh, Ray, that's so great to hear. I do want to note a thank you to NAC, because not Ray saying he's going to implement it, but many of our subject matter experts came at the suggestion of NAC because of that work. right? So thank you for NAC for being part of our leadership there on our strategic committee and for being good partners in implementation. And hi, FQHC over here in rural Vermont. I will be implementing these terms as well. Lots of digital access concerns from a rural perspective. So thank you so much, Ray, for your partnership.
Thanks, Sarah, and Himali's team. Thanks, Himali.
Oh, yes. Anything else? Any other comments? I think we're good. All right, next slide. And again, so this is just that note that sometimes we put things into the ecosystem and the ecosystem judges that they need to be corrected. That's part of being thoughtful implementers and designers. So we brought to you a few things that need to be adjusted. So next slide. We adjusted the definition of coordination because we felt it was incomplete and not patient-centered. We reviewed that very, very early, but it will be part of the vote. So we want to make sure you're aware. And it's also something that just for here, if you have a comment on it, just send us an email because it won't be in any specific master list, even though it's in every one of them behind the scenes. Next slide, please. And then this is, again, a revision of the referral term because we really felt it was too clinical centered and not representing the expertise of our social care friends and partners. And so we revised that as well. Next slide. And then we added a critical missing intervention type that came out of the Integrating Social Care into the Delivery of Healthcare report, the NASEM report, which is that adjustment. And you'll see that again on the vote. These are all, we presented them, I think, the first two meetings. So we just want to make sure that you're aware of them as we head into the vote in August. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. It is 4:54. We finished this in an hour. Probably because it represents amazing amounts of hours up until this point. I know it's been a very, very intensive and lovely collective process with you all. So your jobs, all of you, please review any past materials on the Confluence just to make sure that you understand the ecosystem. We want to make sure that, again, this is a little bit outdated. I'm suddenly realizing I forgot to update the specific homework is send comments on the full master list to gravityproject@hl7.org. After reviewing the master list, again, the themes are things that are missing, things that are incorrect, or things that need to be removed. We will repeat the end-to-end homework in our Tuesday email to you all, just to make sure you all are understanding like the key questions. And then submit comments. Any end-to-end review comment needs to be submitted by the end of the day on August 5th, just FYI, so right after our next meeting, so that we can have that master list ready for consensus vote on August 17th, because we need to make sure the master list is complete for your review prior to the vote. And the vote happens live on that last meeting. Any other questions on end-to-end review process or on these spreadsheets before we close our meeting today? We are so grateful for all of you and all the work you have done. I am so grateful for the amazing people I work with. So thank you so much. Again, if you have any questions about the process for end-to-end review, please send us an email. We'll help you. Terminology, we'll be back at you in 2 weeks. Technical work stream meets 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays. And please join us on the pilot work stream the last Thursday of each month. Is next week, I think. Next week we'll be hearing from one of our pilot sites with our partnership with Civitas. All of this can be found on the HL7 calendar. Thank you, friends. It's really quite amazing what we've done over the last few months, and we're just grateful for all of you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye.